Again, welcome to today's webinar on gaining a deeper understanding of your data by utilizing graph visualization. As Max mentioned, my name is Dr. Jody Strausser, and I'm a solutions engineer here at Tom Sawyer Software. So today we're going to explore a couple of different topics related to visualizing your data. So first, we want to spend a little bit of time understanding why graph visualization matters and why it's so important. And then from there, we're going to jump into perspectives and look at some of the tools that we're going to use to create visualizations with the Perspectives low-code designer and SDK environment. Some of these tools that we're going to explore are the drawing templates and the custom UI drawing tools and a few other ones. So when it comes to visualizing graphs and understanding how to make them valuable, things as simple as the node and edge UIs are important because that's going to provide insight into the structure and the meaning of our graph. So how easily viewers are able to interpret and understand the graph is going to determine how likely they are going to be to use it. So if we look at the example over here to the right, we can see that it's a network diagram containing systems in various states. So here we have a system that's in an up state, one that's in a down state, and here we have a printer that's in an unknown state. It's those UI elements that are giving us those keys to quickly gain any insights and understand the basics of the data set. So it's these details that are going to influence how easily our viewers are going to understand the underlying structure. For this reason, we want to provide as much flexibility and interactivity as we can with our visualizations. So historically, when we think about data, we often think of it in terms of an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe it's a table inside of a database. But when we're looking at it in this tabular format, it's really difficult for us to identify relationships, view trends, or even draw conclusions in the data. But as soon as we take that tabular data and convert it into a visualization, suddenly we're able to identify nodes and relationships and emphasize those connections between those entities. That is going to allow us to gain the insights into our data set. And that's one of the reasons why visualization is so key to understanding data in various forms. So now that we've taken sort of this basic understanding of why visualization is so important, let's jump into an example that comes with perspectives. This is the crime network sample. And as we discussed in previous webinars, we talked about the idea that projects in Designer consist of modules. And in those modules, we have schemas, integrators, which allow us to extract data from various sources, views, which contain various visualization tools, such as graph drawings, maps, trees, various charts, and tables, among other items. So let's start by taking a look at what this looks like in terms of our visualization by looking at our web preview. So we're going to launch our web preview, and it's going to bring up the visualization in various forms. So here we have our graph data set. So if we look at the table, we can see that we have both people and incidents. So our graph visualization is going to represent the relationship between the people, in this case, the suspects in the criminal activity, which are the incidents. Over here, we can look at it in terms of location. Maybe we want to better understand where are the incidents taking place. Here we have a chart that explains some different breakdowns of assault incidents. And of course, we have our tables We have timelines, and we also have some settings that we can use in order to manipulate and interact with our environment a bit more. So let's start by zooming in on our graph a bit. And we're going to see that there are some nodes that represent individuals, and there are nodes that represent the incidents, right? So if I click on one of the individuals, I can see that this person is Robbie Manning, age 19, and is white. If I click on one of the incidents, I can see that that incident is a property damage incident that occurred on 7/20 or 7/5/2008. Another way of allowing the user to interact with our graph is to create these tooltips, right? We want to make it as easy as possible for our users and viewers to be able to garner whatever information they need from our visualizations. So if we zoom out a little bit here, we can see that now we have our data set, and there's a very large number of data sets of data in this data set. So what if our use case was the sample of, I want to only focus in on those incidents that are car prowl incidents? Well, one of the mechanisms that we could use for interacting are filters. And Perspectives allows you to create filters on any number of elements within your data set. So if we go over here to our incidents and click on our offense, uncheck those, we're going to go down and we're going to go to property and select only those incidents that deal with car prowls. So again, if we zoom in, we can see that we have our nodes that are both the suspects and the incidents, but the incidents are specific only to the car prowl incident type. So this allows us to really focus in and answer the specific type of use case question that we might be trying to examine. All right, so now that we've taken kind of a look at the overview of the crime network diagram, let's look at how we might begin to create a visualization using perspectives. So what we're going to do is create a very small subset of the data set from the crime network. So if I click on my integrators here, you can see that I have only, I believe it's 10 incidents and 5 individuals. This is intentional because I want to make certain that as I'm creating my visualization, the changes that I'm reflecting in the nodes or node images in this case aren't confusing the data or having an effect that I'm not necessarily wanting to see. So what we're going to do then is start by creating our visualization by adding a drawing template. So we'll add a drawing template and we're going to call this the simple drawing template. Again, this is for our small data set. And you can see that Perspectives provides a default node template. This way we don't have to start from scratch. But I am going to rename this the incident template. And I have an icon that I've already downloaded, and it's a red triangle with an exclamation mark inside of it. That's what I want to use to represent an incident. So instead of using the default shapes, I'm going to click on my UI type here. I'm going to go into image, and you can see that the default image is a blue dot. Well, I still want my red triangle with the exclamation point. So I'll just click on that. And I'm going to browse to the location where this file is located. Now, these are going to be located inside of our project, inside of the images folder. So I'm going to select my exclamation.png file, and there you can see the icon, and I'm going to click OK. So here's the icon that I'm actually going to use to represent all incidents in my visualization. As you can see, there's a text associated with the icon. So what I want to do is I want to provide the user with some additional information. All right, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to click on that text. I'm going to change it from untitled, and I'm going to use a property in our expression editor from our incidents. And let's use the offense type. So now every incident node that shows up on my visualization will have that UI element and the offense type associated with it. One of the things that we talked about in the crime network example was using the tooltips. So if we use our expression editor again, I can go in and I could go into my incident, and let's say that we wanted to add the date that the incident occurred and additional information about the offense description. So we'll go ahead and click OK. And now we've added in the tooltip for our node. It's just that easy. All right, so I would go ahead and add a node template in for the person, but I want to also talk a little bit about how the fact that we could change the edges as well. So in this case, I'm just going to keep it relatively simple. Let's change the color of our edge to a blue color. And let's change the thickness to 2, just so that we could see that there was a change. All right, so there we have our edge modifications, and you could customize your edges with additional information like labels and whatever you want to add in. So in order to save some time, let's go to I created another version of this, which already has all of this section implemented. So we'll go ahead and load that. And just like before, we still have our simple drawing template. There's our incident like we had created previously. Now we have a person template, which is pretty much using the default template with a couple modifications to add in the individual's name. And of course, we still have our edge template, which we're now named incident person edge. So now that we have our templates defined for what our edges and nodes are going to look like, we can start adding in the view to draw the graph. So in order to accomplish that, we're going to go into Views, right-click on it, and add a view. Now, you could see that there's a whole number of different types of views that we could add in here, but we're going to start off with the drawing view because I want to explore the relationship between the elements in my data set. So by doing so, I'm going to call this the simple drawing view. All right. Now, the first thing that we need to figure out is what do we want to actually show in our graph? We want to be careful not to overload with the graph with information. So we remember from examining the data set that we had incidents, people, and the relationships. These are the domains that we're going to add into our graph visualization. So we'll go ahead and add those domains. And now we need to say, how do we actually show the nodes and the edges in this particular graph? Well, we're going to click on each domain and we're going to go to Actions, right-click on it, select Structural, and add a node. Now, I want to start off by giving my node kind of a meaningful name. So I like to do something like node incident dot. And then let's use our expression editor to go in and grab the incident ID. Since we spent all that time developing a template for our incident node, let's make certain that we select the incident template for that particular incident node. All right, so we'll click OK. We would do the exact same thing for person, but like before, I'm going to show you the completed version of this. But what I want to do is focus in a little bit on the edge this time. So this time we're going to go to structural, add edge, and just like before, we'll give our ID a meaningful name. I'll just call it relationship for right now. And we will give it the ID. Now, the more interesting fields that we need to think about are what is the source and what is the target of our edge? Well, the source is going to be our node.incident dot, and now we're going to go into our incident person relationship. Now, when we developed the schema, we said that the incident ID was a reference to the ID for incidents. So we're going to go ahead and select that. The same thing with the person ID as a reference for the person. All right, so we'll go ahead and select that. We could do the exact same thing for the target ID. And of course, we want to make certain that our template name is selected for our incident person edge template. All right, so we'll go ahead and load the completed version of that. So again, looking at our drawing view, we now have our node incident, our person incident, and there's our edge template with everything filled in. So now we have the source, which is our incident ID, and the target, which is our person ID. All right, so we're almost there already. We're almost able to now visualize the data in this very small data set, but it could be any size data set. The last thing that we need to do is add our drawing into the view layout. Now, the view layout is a great tool to be able to organize what visualizations you want to see on your screen. Do you want to see maps? Do you want to see charts? Do you want to see tables? In our very simple case here, we're going to just go ahead and add in the tables, which are already there, and just right-click, add a drawing view, and add our simple drawing view. And just like that, we're ready to preview our data for our simple drawing or for our simple drawing. So let's click on our web previewer. And again, it's going to launch a browser window. And now we can see that in that very short amount of time, we've been able to create a visualization for the small set of incidents that we have. There's the individuals or suspects that are related to the incidents. We have our edge modifications, and there's our small sample tooltip that shows additional information about the incident in this particular case. All right, so in that very short amount of time, we were able to take that tabular data set that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to us and convert it into a visualization where we could now start making connections and performing further analysis. Now, one of the use cases that we talked about during the crime network example was using the car prowl focus filter. All right, so in that case, we used the filter in order to only focus in on the car prowl incidents. In the original example, we could use the programmatic approach to change the icon to display the different types of incidents. But in this example, I want to demonstrate the custom UI editor. So we're going to change every incident that is a car prowl to have a specific UI component. All right, so in order to do that, let me get this window out of the way again. We're going to go back into our drawing template. And the first thing that we need to do is create another node template, which is a child of our incident. So we're going to call this node template the car prowl template. And we want it to inherit the characteristics of everything that is an incident, but it's going to be specialized. So we're going to select the parent template as incident. All right, so now we have a child template from our incident. So now let's go in and begin developing our custom UI for our incident and our car prowl incident. All right, so first we're going to go into our UI type, and we're not going to select image anymore. We're going to add a group, and we're going to call this our custom incident. Right, and from there, now we could add as many UI types as we want. So let's add a UI, and we're going to call this the custom incident image. All right, so now that we have our custom image defined, we could start editing it. Now, before we jump into adding any of the details to what the actual UI is going to look like, we need to set up some of the builder properties first. So some of the properties that we're going to add, we click on the Add Builder property, and we want to add in a text property. Now, for right now, this is just going to be a placeholder, and we're going to call this the events type. Okay? That's going to be a placeholder we're going to change later on. Next, we're going to add a property that is going to say we want precise shape clipping. And then finally, we want a property that says that we want the resizability to be a tight fit. Now, we don't necessarily have time to go into all of the details of what each of these mean, but there's great documentation that when you download Perspectives, you have access to that explains all of this and much, much more inside of that. So be sure to check that out once you download Perspectives. All right, so now that we have our UI builder properties already defined, now we're going to start creating some of our specific properties for our image. So now we're going to click on New Property, and we're going to call this the Incident Image property. Now, by default, it's a string. I don't want it to be a string. I want it to be an image. So just like before, I'm going to navigate to where my exclamation point inside of my red triangle is located. So I'm setting up that property. You're going to see how we're going to use this in a little bit. All right, so next we're going to click on Add Builder Property, and we're going to do the same thing, but this time it's going to be for the car prowl image. Again, I want to change the data type to be an image. And this time we're going to get the first look at what does our car prowl image actually look like? Well, again, it's just an image that I had downloaded, and it's a criminal next to the car vehicle or next to a vehicle. This is going to show up directly to the left of the red triangle with the exclamation in it. So that's going to be our indicator that that particular incident is a car prowl incident. So we'll go ahead and click OK on that. And the last property that we need to add in is the show prowl property. Now the show prowl property is going to be a Boolean, and that's going to help us decide when should we show the car prowl image and when shouldn't we. So we're going to set the default to yes. All right, so now we've set up all of the UI builder properties. So again, let's go in and open the next version of this that already has all of that information stored inside of it. And just like before, we'll go back into our custom UI and edit it. And now we're able to start beginning to develop the actual custom UI that we're going to use to display both incidents and car prowl incidents. So the first thing that we need to think about is Our UI is going to have a text component to it, and it's going to have an image component to it. So we're going to select our space here, and we want to search for a splitter. Again, all of these functions are defined in the documentation. So if we search for the splitter and then right-click on it and add it as a child, now we have the beginning of our development for our custom UI. So let's give our splitter UI element a meaningful name, and this is going to be the incident splitter UI. All right. Now, our two portions to that are our text and our image. So let's add a text UI to the top portion of our splitter. So let's search for that. There's our text UI. Right-click on it, add it as a child. Again, we've given it a meaningful name. This is the incident text. Okay. And this time, the value that we want to specify for the text is going to come from a function. So let's go into our edit expression and go to functions, and we want to search for the name function. So the name function is located here. So let's go ahead and add that into our expression and click OK. So now the text is going to use the name function. All right, and again, that name function describes the name of the specified drawing element. So the description, it shows up inside of our expression editor. Okay. So the next item that we want to add is the image portion. So we're going to add an annotated image here. So we're going to search for annotated image. And we want to make certain that we select the empty space, add it as a child. And this is going to represent the image for every single incident in our visualization. So it's going to be that rectangle with the black exclamation point inside of it. So let's give it, again, a name. This is the incident image. And we need to start adding some specific UI element properties now. So we want to add our image. And this is where we're going to use the UI builder property for the image that we created earlier. Remember, we created the incident image? This is where we're going to use it. So we're going to click on our image, and rather than going to our file, we're going to click on our expression editor again, and we're going to pull out that builder attribute called incident image. Right? So now you can see that the image is beginning to show up, but it's quite large. So let's add another property that is going to be the tight image percent. And let's put it at 15%. All right, so now you can see this is our generic incident image that is going to be displayed for all of our incident nodes, except for car prowl types. So now it's time for us to take this incident image icon and specialize it for the car prowls. So we're going to do that by adding a condition. So if we search for our condition here and add our conditional UI element, this is going to be basically an if statement, right? So we're going to say, should we show the car prowl image? So we're going to say if show prowl. Right? Now our condition, we have to go back to that UI builder property that we created. And we're going to look at the show prowl attribute. Remember, that's the Boolean that says, should I show the prowl image or not? So we're going to click on OK on that. Click OK. And now, finally, if this condition is true, it's time for us to add our car Prowl image. So we're going to add an image UI and add it add it as a child, give it a name. This is our car Prowl image. All right. And just like we did with the incident image, we're going to have to add the image style property. And just like before, we're not going to go to our file. We're going to go back into our expression and select the car Prowl image. All right, so now you can see that the car Prowl image is there, but it's covering up the majority of our incident image. Well, we can adjust that by changing the values of the left top point and the right bottom point of our car Prowl image. And in order to save time, I did that in the next version of this. So let's click OK and load in the next version. All right, so our next version now has our drawing template, our incident, our custom UI, and there's the image that is going to be displayed for every car Prowl node. So that's our node UI. All right, so now that we have all of our custom incident UIs defined, we want to start adding it into our graph, right? So we want that specialized incident node of car Prowl to show this UI element. So in order to do that, the first thing that we do is we have to add a new domain, right? So before we had incidents, people, and the relationships. Well, now we have a new domain that's our car Prowl domain. So our car Prowl has two conditions that must be true in order for us to display it. It has to have a type of incident because we don't want to display it for people. And it has to have an offense type that is equal to the string car Prowl, right? So we set up those conditions by just right-clicking and adding in conditions. I added those in already to save us some time. So now it's time for us to start going into our template and making certain that our car Prowl only shows up for the car Prowl incidents. Right? So remember in our text, when we were creating our custom UI, we just had the offense type as a placeholder. Yeah, well, now it's time to actually change that into a incident property. So we'll select our offense type again. Now, for an incident, we don't want to show the car Prowl. So we're going to change show Prowl to no for just the incident template. But for the car Prowler incident template, we want it to be yes. And you can see that that template has already inherited the offense type characteristic from the incident template. All right, so now we have our templates all set up with our custom UIs. Let's go in and add it into our simple drawing view definition. So since we added a new domain into our domains, we need to add it into our drawing view. So let's add a domain view. And you can see that now we have a user-defined domain called CarProwl. Just like we did for the incidents and persons, we have to decide when should we apply this template. So we're going to go in and we're going to apply the node template to incident dot, I'm sorry, to node.incident.id. And the template name that we want to apply is our car Prowl incident. So we'll click OK. So now we have that domain added into our drawing view definition. So we should be able to click on our viewer here And if I drag over the web browser that opened up, you can see we still have all of the original incidents displaying with the red triangle and the exclamation point. But over here, we have the car prowl. And that's going to help us define and analyze that use case where we're focusing in on those particular nodes, that particular incident type. All right, so in this example, we just kind of went through and saw how we could take our beginning drawing visualization and convert it into something that is specific for a use case pretty easily by adding in some custom UI. This using the crime network that we looked at earlier. So let's go ahead and reopen the crime network and look at our web preview again. And before we look at the preview, let's look at the drawing templates. If we look at the social network analysis template, we can see that there is a UI node for each of these types. In this case, we're more interested in the ping one. So let's look at the UI type of person ping node and edit it. And here you could see these are the UI element properties that we're using in order to create that icon with those circles extending out from the center. Right now, this is used when we're performing some analysis on our graph. Now, there's an entire webinar that's going to be associated with analysis coming in the very near future. So what we want to do is just kind of look at our example and look at it in terms of the centrality. So if we click on the closeness centrality and look in the people network, maybe it's not going to come up on me. Let me reload it. All right. Now if we zoom in a little bit, we could already start seeing those custom UI icons highlighting. So if we zoom in, we can start focusing in on the results of our analysis, which highlight those individuals with the K-core centrality. All right, and again, that will be explored further on in future webinars. All right, so let's kind of take a step back and review what we talked about during this webinar today. So we started off by talking about why is graph visualization or just visualization in general so important? Well, remember, we want to make certain that we can take tabular data and create and understand the correlation between the nodes and the edges and perform analysis as quickly as possible. From there, we went in and we explored the drawing template and we created a very basic visualization based off of the crime network. Next, we moved into exploring the custom UI editor and we created that custom UI for the car prowl. And then finally, we showed an example of what that might look like inside of a real world example. All right, so again, zooming out, you could see all of our icons emanating those concentric circles. So that concludes the webinar for today. I want to thank you all for joining us. Please check out our YouTube channel for more how-to videos, and be sure to contact us today at www.tomsawyer.com to start your free trial of Perspectives, or please schedule a call with one of our graph and data visualization experts to explore some of your data sets.